Hi there, hand readers. Today I'm going to be talking about relationship lines, otherwise known as affection lines, marriage lines, and union lines. And these are the little lines which run in a transverse direction, in other words, horizontally, from the edge of the hand underneath the baby finger across the Mercury mount. It's really very fascinating how complex this little area of the hand is and how much there is to study in terms of the variables of lineation that appear here. One could almost say the relationship lines themselves could be an area of speciality, as there's so many possible variables. But today I'm going to just try and present some basic concepts that pertain to these lines. As with all of hand reading, there are so many different perspectives on each particular feature. And traditionally, though, these marriage lines or relationship lines specifically describe marriage and when marriage will happen. The idea here is that the higher the line appears to the base of the baby finger, the Mercury finger or air finger, the later in life the marriage will happen. And the inverse of that is true, that the lower it is to the start of the heart line, the water line in the five element system, the sooner the marriage will happen. And then furthermore, the deeper and longer the line, the more enduring the marriage. But as I'm sure you know, often we find, like for example myself, I've got one on my left hand and two on my right hand. How does that really, which hand do you read? How does one really define what that might mean in terms of marriages? Some people might have as many as 4, even 5 on one hand and perhaps fewer on the other hand. Some people have none. And we might often find that people with many relationship lines are in one enduring marriage, and vice versa. People with one marriage lines might have had several marriages or deep relationships. Clearly, these relationship lines are unreliable when it comes to predicting how many marriages or long-term relationships the owner might have. I personally relate most with the 5-element system of how to interpret marriage lines or relationship lines. In the 5-element system, contrary to popular myth, these little lines obviously do not predict the number of relationships or marriages, but instead they speak of the quality of the relationship that the person most longs for. The lines refer to the person's emotional orientations in life. Consider that this area, the Mercury mount, is governed by air, and it partly pertains to the mental area of our lives. Therefore, it's more our attitudes and our thinking about relationships that's depicted by these lines than it is the relationship itself. And then consider too that sometimes these lines extend and join up with the girdle, the so-called girdle of Venus, or otherwise known as the upper minor water line. And that brings another whole component into the interpretation, because upper minor water lines are governed by water, obviously, and they bring in qualities of idealism. So we've got the combination of our thinking about our relationships plus the influence that these lines have in terms of our emotional, our idealistic, our water-governed, our emotional-governed perceptions on relationships as well. Now, this is how readers who utilize the 5-element system of how to interpret hands understand these markings. Have a look at this illustration. Here we see that we've measured and divided the space between the start of the water line, that is the heart line, and the base of the air, which is the baby finger, into 4 element levels. How we read this is that the level at which the most dominant line appears reveals the material, the emotional, the sexual, or the mental qualities that are most needed and wanted in the relationship. So in this illustration, we see at the earth level, which is closest to the water line, the heart line, this might suggest, if the dominant line is here, this would suggest the need for material security. This person's basic domestic stability in their home life would be their highest priority. They would need a steady partner, they would want continuity. Then, slightly higher on the water level, the person would long for closer friendship. They would need adoration, emotional support. Theirs is a more idealistic approach to love. Perhaps we could say they're in love with love. Then higher, closer, it's a little bit closer to the base of the baby finger. Here the person, like in this image, prefers a more fiery, passionate, perhaps sexual relationship with lots of diverse activity. And then actually what we often see in older people is a dominant line highest, set close to the top of the Mercury mount. And this indicates the longing or the need for, or even the immersion in, a platonic, mentally stimulating relationship, which is for them intellectually compatible, where they share the same interests and outlook on life. I thought I'll share a bit too about the variables of forms of these particular little lines. The very well-known one is that when it slopes downwards, it's an indication of disappointment, of divorce, of separation. So what we really want to see is a nice, straight, deep relationship line. This could very much indicate a nice long-term stable relationship. A rather superstitious meaning for when there's a tiny little cross at the end of a relationship line is the sudden death of a partner. And this little cross would aspect obstacles, difficulties, problems, either in the relationship or at the end of a relationship through death. Sometimes you'll see a little island right at the very beginning of a relationship line, and that could indicate problems before the relationship even begins. Or perhaps a fear of having a relationship is another possible meaning here. When the island appears at the end of the little relationship line, some people say that that has to do with not being able to express one's emotion, that it's a sign of unhappiness and ultimately separation. On occasions, one even sees many little islands along this line, and tradition has it that this could show violence, it could show tribulations, tremendous amount of difficulty in a relationship. And the traditional meaning for a forked ending, which is quite common actually, is divorce. And possibly also that the person expects a lot from their relationship. Actually, all of these little meanings are coming more from the traditional palmistry. The way I understand it is we apply these basic 5-element system in terms of the levels and the type of relationship the person most longs for. And then depending on your orientation as a reader, you might want to bring in some of the meanings that I've just covered. Sometimes one even sees a little relationship crashing down right over the waterline, the heart line. It's as if it extends right down, almost even towards the beginning of the lifeline, potentially. And the meaning here pertains to idealism, quest for the perfect partner. But when that partner is found, the person would be very loyal and devoted to their partner. So all of these that I've just explained would each take their own illustrations, a little bit beyond the scope of this presentation today. But you can get the idea here of just how complex and intricate this little area of the hand is. And next week I'll take it a step further and I'll talk about the children lines, which are the vertical lines which cross the relationship lines. If you'd like a reading with me or if you'd like to study with me, please contact me. I do teach 3 wonderful different courses, and online readings are based on photographs. Thanks so much for watching and listening. I hope you'll sign up as a subscriber and like and share the video. I'll see you next week.